possible without the continued support of our hosts, the Lebanon Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the financial contributions from our sponsors. So what I would like to do is list our sponsors tonight and ask that you hold your applause to the end. Our presenting sponsor was the First Energy Foundation. Our Patriot sponsor is the City of Lebanon. Our hero sponsors are Busgen Davis Law Office, Lebanon Sertoma Club, Luther Care, and Roush Real Estate, Tom B. Morrissey TV and Appliance. Our media sponsor is Lebanon Daily News, and the flags were provided by the Hershey and Palmyra Sertoma Club. Thank you for your continued support of this event. Now we have something a little bit special tonight. You noticed in the atrium out there was a lady, a beautiful lady in red, who is manning a booth. And in your program you will find out there's a sheet, and that describes some of what she's doing out there. Next year there is a Normandy Immersion Leadership Tour that the Chamber Foundation is sponsoring. And she's out there and she can answer questions. Sign you up for the tour if you so desire. It's for next year, June 19th to 27th, which is the 70th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. If you don't get a chance to talk to her, tomorrow night there is an informational tour at the Chamber, or pre-information meeting at the Chamber. That's tomorrow evening from 5:30 to 6:30, and there's contact information on this sheet for you if you're interested in that. I would also like to recognize the hard work of the Patriot Day Concert Committee, because they really do a lot to pull this together and to make this event a success. So please do stand up and be recognized for the role that you play in this evening's event. And they get paid by applause, so let's give the Patriot Committee. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce another hardworking lady, the Honorable Mayor Sherry Capello. Sorry.
Good evening, Patriots. Today is a day to remember their stories. On a beautiful sunny morning on September 11, 2001. Boy, I have a great start here too. Must be the lighting. On a beautiful sunny morning on September 11, 2001, the world stood still as millions of people witnessed the horrific terrorist attacks on America unfolding on live television. It's hard to believe one of America's darkest moments took place more than a decade ago. In 2002, Patriot Day was designated as a day of remembrance, honoring those killed by the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. As another 9/11 anniversary is here, people across the nation and world will honor and pay tribute to the men, women, and children who perished in the attacks. Close to 3,000 people lost their lives on that dark day, including more than 400 heroic first responders. I previously shared with this group that my son Jeremy lost one of his best friends, Nick Brandemarty, on the 89th floor of the Second World Trade Center. Jeremy and Nick both had attended Fordham University on football scholarships, and they had just graduated from college a few months prior to 9/11. Nick worked for Keefe, Brunette, and Woods, researching the finances of publicly traded companies. Nick was able to call his mom after the first plane hit the First World Trade Center, and he told her that they were told that it was safer to remain in the building and to not evacuate. Stephen Mulderry, a co-worker of Nick's, and who also was a victim that day, called his brother Peter. This is his brother's account of that morning. I called over to his office. One of his colleagues picked up. He said, "Yeah, we're okay, but my God." Then Stephen came back to his desk. He said, "What's up, brother?" His usual salutation. "Are you all right?" He said, "Yeah, I was just over at the window, but my God, I don't know if people were falling or jumping, but I saw people falling to their death." I said, "Oh my God." He said, "They're human beings." Then he said, "I gotta go. The lights are ringing and the market is going to open." In the background, I can hear the public address system, which I later learned was saying there had been an accident and the safest place is here. While they're off the phone, the second tower is hit. Peter can't get through to Stephen. He calls other family members. They haven't been able to get through either. Peter continues, I would try intermittently. The phone rang about 20 minutes before Tower 2 fell. He said, hey brother. I let out a big, real groan of relief. Thank God you're okay. He said, I'm really not. You're not out? He said, we've tried everything. We tried to go up, we tried to get down. It's just too hot and it's too much smoke. We found a room, a conference room, and we found a phone that works. There was one phone I came to understand, and he was having his time with it. He said, I need Mom's number. My mother had recently moved to a new home, and none of us had really committed her number to memory. I asked, are you sure there's no way out of that room? He said, no, like I told you, we've tried everything. We're just going to wait for the firemen to come and get us. But it's a long way for them to come, and the smoke's really bad. Some people were talking about throwing a fire extinguisher through the window, but I know that will be the end of us. But if someone panics and does it, there's nothing I can do. Then he said, I really gotta call Mom in case I don't get out. I love you, brother. He wasn't crying. I said, I love you too. He got through to my mother on her answering machine. I haven't heard the tape. The essence of the message is, a plane has hit the building. I don't have much. I just want to tell you I love you. No matter what, I'm going to be okay. I think there were 12 other people in the room. It was on the 87th floor, a New York State office and a conference room. Mainly it was men from the training room, mainly college athletes. This is just one of close to 3,000 stories. In the years since, many Americans have given their health and their lives to fight the terrorists who invaded our land. They fight for family and friends. They fight for strangers. The government directs the fight, but the Patriot soldiers go to war for the people by whose grace this government exists. We are a people dedicated to the triumph of freedom and democracy over evil and tyranny, from the first responders who gave their all to save others, to our armed forces who have pursued the war against terrorism, to Americans who also have fought back against terror by choosing to overcome evil with good. By loving their neighbors as they would like to be loved, countless citizens have answered the call to help others. They have contributed to relief efforts, improved homeland security in their communities, and volunteered their time to aid those in need. Those whom we lost on September 11, 2001 will forever hold a cherished place in our hearts and in the history of our nation. Remember their stories. As we mark the 12th anniversary of that tragic day, remember their sacrifice and remember their memory by pursuing peace and justice in the world and at home. Thank you, and God bless Lebanon City, Lebanon community, and God bless these states of the great United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Capello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 12th Annual Patriot Day Concert. I'm Don Bowman, your announcer for tonight's program. We are privileged to have as our guest speaker, Mr. Brian D. Smith. Brian is currently the Executive Director and Chief of Operations for First Aid and Safety Patrol in Lebanon, which responds to over 20,000 requests for assistance annually. Brian's been involved in public safety since 1993 and has been a volunteer EMT, volunteer firefighter, and a certified paramedic. While employed by the Emergency Health Services Federation, he served as the Director of Resource Management and has been responsible for clinical advancements in the Commonwealth. In 2008, Brian accepted the position he currently holds with First Aid and Safety Patrol, leading the organization to a culture of safety and recognition in 2009 as the Ambulance Service of the Year for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He maintains a very busy schedule of community service, actively serving on various boards and committees and civic clubs throughout the region. During last year's Hurricane Sandy, Brian led a team of 20 EMS providers staffing 5 ambulances 24 hours a day. His team was responsible for multiple missions, including well-being checks, emergency responses backing up local New Jersey units, transfers of patients from facilities, and standbys for the recovery effort. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Smith.
Well, I think it was just yesterday I was starting in EMS, and it's hard to believe that it's been as long as it has been. Good evening, and I'd like to thank the Lebanon Valley Chamber of Commerce and those who put forth great effort to make this evening possible. It brings comfort to my heart to see so many individuals coming together as a community to remember such a tragic day in our country. September 11th has a whole new meaning to each and every one of us. And prior to the attacks on the United States of America, the 11th day of September was a birthday, an anniversary, an employment anniversary, or just another special day in someone's life. And post those attacks, the first memory that springs into one's head is fear, anger, concern, and a desire to help those in need. September 11th, 2001. I have not spoken to a single person who does not clearly recall their exact location on that day. Many people were already at their daily grind, the second work day of the week, and as I personally reflect, I vividly remember walking in to our main headquarters day room to observe the first tower on fire. The news at that time was just reporting that there had been an accident and that the tower was on fire. And while we watched the news, my office manager and I observed the second aircraft strike the second tower. Shocked, we began to have that awful feeling this was not an accident. The timeline of events the Tuesday morning of September 11th is very clearly detailed in publications. And at 08:45, the American Airlines Boeing 767 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The jet was loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel and struck near the 80th floor of the 110-story tower. At 09:03, the second Boeing 767, a United Airlines flight, struck the South Tower near the 60th floor. Videos of that frightful day show the public in shock, struck with fear, and many first responders just stood in amazement. At 09:45, a Boeing 757 struck the west side of the Pentagon, making a significant impact, huge fire, and collapse of the concrete structure. At 10:10, a fourth aircraft plummeted from the sky, crashing into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. While there are many things in common with each of the attack locations, one that hits close to home is first responders rushed into where many others were running away. Webster defines a first responder as a person who is among those responsible for going immediately to the scene of an accident or emergency to provide assistance. I like to define a first responder as a mother, father, son, a daughter, an aunt, an uncle, or a cousin. Our first responders are an integral part of our community. First responders are EMTs, paramedics, firefighters, fire police officers, hazmat technicians, and 911 telecommunicators, both career and volunteer. September 11th, 2001 will forever go down in U.S. history as a tragedy. And tragedy is defined as a disastrous event. The reality is that first responders respond to tragic events nearly every single day. Tragedies occur at our local, our county, state, and federal level, and the severity of these tragic events brings a certain level of press and media attention. The severity of the tragic event often determines how long it remains in the memory of our community. It's my feeling that we're often way too complacent in society. Do we stand guard today and concerned about our safety as much as we did on September 12, 2001, just one day after the attacks on the United States? I'm blessed with a wonderful family. Blended family with busy lives. Frequently, my wife and I find ourselves running in two separate directions, getting our children to sporting events, music events, play dates with friends, and then getting that homework done. We're not unlike many Americans. Our society has asked us to put high demands on our lives. It was not too long ago that my wife and I actually caught the evening news. It was almost depressing. So many negative items in the news. But are they tragic events? I guess the only way that we can truly know is to ask those that the event affected. Just here in our beautiful Lebanon Valley, you do not have to go back into too much history to find an event that was tragic. From abductions to shootings to stabbings to accidents, and the list goes on and on. What I can tell you is these tragic events have commonality. First responders. First responders witness the effects of crimes, fatal accidents, fatal shootings, and other incidents. First responders are human. They live and play within your communities. They coach your sons and daughters, they're members of your local church, and they're individuals that you pass at the grocery store or on the rail trail on a sunny weekend. They have emotions. When these providers provide care and service to the community, they're often forced to take these emotions home. I can recall responding to an accident where children were injured and killed, and all I wanted to do was talk to my children, hug them, and let them know how they're loved. The last handful of years, our country has experienced numerous natural disasters. These disasters have had multiple tragic events within one singular disaster. And as I mentioned, first responders live, work, and play in their communities. When disasters such as Hurricane Katrina, Tropical Storm Lee, and Hurricane Sandy strike, these responders are affected not only in their response needs, but also in their own lives. When Tropical Storm Lee struck here in the Lebanon Valley, many resources were taxed. First Aid and Safe Patrol found challenges such as our stations in Anvil and Jonestown becoming islands. And as the storm began to hit our community, we patrolled the streets, doing route planning, trying to identify avenues of transportation to get patients to the hospital. And what I can tell you is that when your phone rings in the middle of the night, nothing good can come from that. We received a request to evacuate the Hyman S. Kaplan Pavilion due to flooding. Because of our pre-planning and our rapid response, we were able to evacuate over 30 patients to safety in a very quick time. My Assistant Chief, Anthony Deven, learned firsthand the challenges of being both a first responder and a victim. The stop by at his residence on the first day of rainfall found 2 feet of water in his own home. And as we embarked on these midnight efforts, I was leading the team to evacuate the Hyman Kaplan Pavilion. I received a call from Tony saying he was on his way to help us with our efforts. When I asked Tony to stay home and care for his own family and his own needs, he responded with, "Chief, my house is gone. I have nowhere else to go but to come help." Many of our team members experienced the same challenges that you faced during the disaster. No electric for days, flooding, and childcare challenges as schools began to close. However, They were resilient and reported for duty to provide services for their community. This is just one story of the personal impact felt by responders when tragedy and disaster strike our own community. And again last year, our community braced for what appeared to be a second attempt of Mother Nature to wreak havoc upon us. We planned, we prepared, and we got lucky. Hurricane Sandy struck the East Coast with extreme force, and our Lebanon Valley escaped with heavy rain and localized flooding. Nothing like we had experienced during Tropical Storm Lee. Meanwhile, our partners in New Jersey were starting to conduct rescue and recovery efforts after Sandy made landfall. Resources were taxed and a need for help was transmitted. Since Pennsylvania had provided great support during Hurricane Irene, one of the first calls New Jersey made was to Pennsylvania. Armed with prepared EMS strike teams, the Pennsylvania Bureau of EMS began to organize assets throughout PA. First Aid and Safe Patrol has participated in out-of-state deployments in the past few years, and once again, we're ready to deploy. And just days after Hurricane Sandy made landfall, the first EMS strike team was on the move to New Jersey to provide assistance. 4 providers from First Aid and Safe Patrol deployed on the initial deployment, which lasted 9 days. 4 additional providers deployed in the third deployment, which lasted 5 days. And I had the privilege and honor of acting as a team leader for the third deployment. Each deployment from South Central Pennsylvania included 22 EMS providers, 5 ambulances, and a team leader vehicle. We were responsible for providing 24-hour operations to the devastated communities, 911 system, evacuation of patients from hospitals and long-term care, and standbys on the islands as the community began to return to find many of their homes devastated and personal items in disarray. I cannot begin to tell you the impact on the hearts of every provider while we watched and assisted the community in carrying their personal belongings, only enough to fit in one garbage bag. These victims loaded their bags onto a school bus and returned to the mainland after only 2 hours of time at their residence. When there was downtime, we often sat and we wondered what kind of an impact we were truly making. Well, 2 very specific events stick out in my mind. While finishing up our tour, physically and mentally exhausted, 5 ambulances and our support vehicle began to head up the Garden State Parkway as we began to head back to the staging area to prepare for our downtime before demobilization. And we were greeted by the New Jersey State Patrol providing an escort, fire departments lining the streets with thanks, and the New Jersey community beeping with praises. The second event was relayed to us by a partner agency from Pennsylvania. And while they were on the search for some warm food, they were able to get some barbecue from a takeout. While they were there, a woman approached them and thanked them for coming. But it wasn't just the thanks. It was the words that followed her thanks. She and her husband, a paramedic in New Jersey, were enjoying a dinner together. The first time she had seen him since the storm had struck 3 weeks earlier. It was only because of the sacrifices and leaving our families back home that she was able to have that moment. But why? Why is it that human beings are drawn to the public safety career or volunteer opportunity? Is it for the pay? Most times we get paid half the amount of money we could make in the private sector. Not to mention, we volunteer. Is it for the glory? What glory? Successes often go unnoticed, but our failures get highlighted in the press. So if there's no great pay, and a pat on the back is seldom received, what is it? Well, maybe Webster could redefine a first responder. A first responder is an individual, one person, a human, who has a heart and emotions, who makes up a team, more than one individual, who works shoulder to shoulder with another individual for the better good of the community to respond to tragedy, any crisis felt by a community member that causes grief, and When they show up, you are darn glad to see them. Every single day, the Lebanon Valley first responders respond to over 100 requests for services. Between EMS, police, fire, hazmat, and 911 telecommunications, there are over 500 individuals dedicating their hearts, their minds, and their souls to this community. There are men and women who wake in the midnight hours, leaving their sick children to be cared for by their spouses, and they enter your home while it's on fire, attempting to salvage your personal belongings and your home. There are men and women who respond to domestic disputes, shootings, and stabbings, while their family is at home praying that they come home after their shift. There are men and women who have had a child die in their arms, while their family is at home waiting for their 12 or 14-hour shift to end. So I ask you this, is there any less heroism if a first responder responds to the World Trade Center to your home when you are experiencing the biggest tragedy of your life? These men and women thrive on the opportunity to take chaos and organize it to provide security and comfort in your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That timpani roll by Mr. Dave Frederick tells us the concert is about to begin. The March King, John Philip Sousa, wrote this evening's first selection. It premiered in 1896 at the Tremont Theater in Boston as part of an operetta. Sousa wrote, bearing the same name. Ladies and gentlemen, Timothy Erdman, the Lebanon Community Concert Band, and John Philip Sousa's El Capitan. In the early 1960s, a movie with Yul Brynner, Charles Bronson, Steve McQueen, and many other stars and stars-to-be told the story of 7 gunmen hired to protect a Mexican village from invading marauders. Let's see if you can recall the name of this film. The music by Elmer Bernstein changed the style of Western soundtracks for decades. Roy Philippe arranged Bernstein's work for concert band. Here is... Okay, quiz time. Does anyone remember the name of the movie? 1, 2, 3.
The Magnificent Seven.
Very good. That's right. And now something to keep you awake late tonight. Try remembering the names of all 7 actors. I bet you forget Brad Dexter. The Magnificent Seven, of course, is the name of the film, and that brings us to our very own magnificent duo. This pair is a regular feature with Concert Club Lebanon Community Concert Band, known as Accordion to My Banjo. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carolyn Pfeiffer-Erdman and Robert Banjo Bob Ballphaser.
With the theme of the program, Carolyn and I will begin with Yankee Doodle Dandy and Grand Old Flag, followed by This Is My Country, and then we'll finish with the song Made popular by Louis Prima back in the 1960s. More recently, it's been brought onto YouTube by a British band named the Jive Aces. Also performing the song on YouTube, Brenda Lee, Willie Nelson, Chet Atkins, and the Muppets. Title of the song, Bring Me Sunshine.
all rock brand new. Tomorrow bring me happy. Never bring me any tears. Let your arms be as warm as the sun from up above. Bring me joy, bring me sunshine, bring me love. Sunshine, bring me love. I said, bring me love, bring me sunshine, bring me love. Baby, bring me love, bring me sunshine, bring me love.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Joining Carolyn and Bob were Ted Weaver on the tuba and our very own Lester Young, Howard Prez Boots on that tenor saxophone. Not sure which one of those two was Louis Green and which one was Gilly Smith. But, hey, Steve. No, don't disappear. Now that Police Sergeant Steve Ward has indeed put in an appearance, we do want to keep him around for a while as the band performs this next selection, always a favorite, Neil Diamond's Coming to America.
We've been traveling far without a home, but not without a storm. Free, all we want to be free. We huddle close and hold on to a dream. On the boats and on the planes, they're coming to America. Never looking back again. They're coming to America. It seems so far away, but we're traveling light today in the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm. To a new and a shiny place, may our men will say our grace. Freedom's like burning gold. Freedom's like burning gold. Everywhere around the world, they're coming to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they're coming to America. Got a dream to take from there. They're coming to America. Got a dream they love to share. They're coming to America. They're coming to America. They're coming to America. They're coming to America. They're coming to America today. 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 My country is a name. may I say, may I say, today, things were gone that I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause this flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American. At least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died to make that right to me, and I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time to stand and say, I'm proud to be an American, but at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. To be an American, or at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Of America, God bless the USA.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Steve's encore was, of course, Lee Greenwood's ever popular God Bless the USA. How about another round of applause? Those of you who've been to our Patriot Day concerts before know that we comb the local area for talented musicians. And tonight we're proud to spotlight the Bells of St. Andrews. These popular bell ringers hail from nearby St. Andrews Presbyterian Church, and under the direction of Pat Yates, they're here to perform 3 selections. The first is Siamba, a South African marching song that caught on as a favorite in North American churches in the 1990s. The bell choir will then perform a piece composed by Anglican clergyman John Dykes called Melita, a tune you may recognize also known as Eternal Father, Strong to Save. In their final number, the ensemble will be joined by a brass choir in Cynthia Dobrinsky's stirring arrangement of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Bells of St. Edmund. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Our final number for the first half here in our concert will be followed by a 15-minute intermission during. That's quite right. Anybody who gets a standing ovation can do whatever she likes. The next number will be followed by a 15-minute intermission, during which time we invite you to the rear of the auditorium to purchase a compact disc recording of this 12th annual Patriot Day concert. In addition to our sponsors, tonight's performance is once again being funded in part by Pennsylvania Partners in the Arts. And to get your feet moving back to the CD order table, we do want to wrap up the first half of this evening with Lieutenant Philip Egner's official West Point March. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We do apologize for a bit of an oversight with the CD order table. We simply failed to have someone back there for most of intermission. However, there is someone there now, and she will be manning the table as you leave. If you would like to order a CD of this evening's marvelous concert, we certainly hope you will do so. We begin our second half tonight with the playing of a march written by Harry Alford for the University of Illinois Football Marching Band. Here is Glory of the Gridiron.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The Italian opera La Traviata was written by Giuseppe Verdi in 1853. The first act of this three-act opera ends with an aria sung by the opera's central character, Violetta Valery, a French courtesan. Violetta has thrown a lavish party to celebrate her recovery from an illness. She is wooed by Alfredo, who declares his love for her. She sings of her love for him, but also her need for the freedom to live her own life. The aria is entitled Sempre Libera. Tonight we bring you Violetta in the person of Lebanon's very own lyric soprano. Please welcome Jessica Weidman.
No. Another round of applause. That's what happens when you have fettuccine Alfredo for dinner. And speaking of Alfredo,
We do want to thank Sally Gary, our clarinetist, for having filled in for Alfredo this evening. Thank you, Sally. And of course, we will be hearing more from Jessica soon. Well, there are plenty of Dukes in Verdi operas, but there's only one American musical Duke, Edward Kennedy Ellington. Yeah, oh yes. In our next number, you'll hear Dukes Take the A Train, Don't Get Round Much Anymore, Mood Indigo, Caravan, and It Don't Mean a Thing. Paul Murtha wrote this arrangement for concert band a few years ago. Here is Duke Ellington in concert. those who serve and have served under our nation's flag for the past 237 years. Timothy Erdman and the band will perform Bob Loden's arrangement of the Armed Forces Salute. When you hear your branch's service song, please stand and be recognized and accept our thanks for your service. Here is Armed Forces Salute. The United States Army. The United States Coast Guard. The United States Marine Corps. The United States Air Force. The United States Navy.
Good. Yeah.
When I lay my head down every night and go to sleep in peace, I can stay there knowing all is well while you're standing on your feet, keeping watch, protecting shore to shore, in the air and oceans too, defending freedom at all cost, for the red, white, and the blue. Thank you, oh, thank you, men and women, brave and strong, to those who serve so gallantly, we sing this grateful song. To the soldiers who have traveled on to countries far and near, in peace and war you paid the price for the cause you hold so dear. Wake each morning bright and know that freedom reigns, because of your great sacrifice, your country joins to sing. Thank you, oh, thank you, men and women, brave and strong, to those who serve so gallantly, we sing this grateful song. Thank you, oh, thank you, men and women, brave and strong, to those who serve so gallantly, we sing this grateful song.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The band's encore included Jessica Whiteman in Michael and Angela Souders' beautiful composition, Thank You, Soldiers. Well, even though Highland Cathedral was originally composed as a Scottish song in 1982, it has since become a patriotic staple of music in this country. Whether for soldiers or first responders, Highland Cathedral is played to honor those who risk their lives in defense of their countrymen. With us tonight to perform Highland Cathedral is bagpiper Jeremy Buss. In addition to playing the bagpipes, Jeremy performs as principal hornist with the 553rd Air Force Band of the Northeast, stationed in Fort Indian Town Gap. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Buss for Highland Cathedral. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Jerry Buss's encore of Amazing Grace will surely live long in our memories. The Star-Spangled Banner is the official anthem of the United States of America. Traditionally, we stand when it is played, but tonight's arrangement of the Star-Spangled Banner is written by John Higgins with words for the second verse by Claire Cloninger. In view of that, we ask that you remain seated during this extended version, which was premiered on ABC television as the finale to the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty. The Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming? Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rockets red almost bursting in air,
He'll be back in a moment. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That encore, of course, was John Philip Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever. Well, you have been a splendid and energetic audience. I don't think I've ever seen quite that many standing ovations at a Patriot Day concert. So give yourselves a hand. As we approach the end of tonight's program, we would like to extend our thanks to the folks of the Lebanon School District for allowing us the use of the auditorium. And we'd like to once again thank the Lebanon Valley Chamber of Commerce for having hosted this event, along with our sponsors, First Energy Foundation, the City of Lebanon, Buskin Davis Law Offices, the Lebanon Sertoma Club, Luther Care, Route Real Estate, Tom B. Morrissey TV and Appliance as well. Another word of thanks to the Lebanon Daily News for helping spread the word about tonight's concert, as well as our flag sponsor, the Hershey Palmyra Sertoma Club. Before we do conclude this evening's concert with our traditional close of God Bless America, Karen, are you here? Yes, you are. I'm going to bring Karen Groh to the stage, who is one of the coordinators and kind of the guiding spirit of this whole enterprise here. She deserves a hand as well. And Karen gets to do the heavy lifting. We would like to ask the following folks to return to the stage. Brian Smith. Are you here, Brian? You don't have to button the jacket, it's warm. Steve Board. Must be off feeding his bagpipes. And we would like to ask Pat Yates to stand and be recognized and have a representative come and get her trophy as well. We'll make sure Jeremy gets it. At this time, we will retire the colors.
Honor guard and hut, port hard. Advance and retire the colors of our great country and commonwealth. Order.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We do wish you a safe journey home. The band now closes with our traditional God Bless America. Feel free to sing along.
God bless America, and that I won't stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans wide before. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans wide before. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, and that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to